Morning, Congressman. How are you?
Very good.
Good to hear it.
Actually, it's kind of scared to death for the country, but otherwise very good.
Yeah, well, we can talk a little bit about that this morning. Well, I'm gonna start off right away. Just welcoming everybody and welcome the Congressman to our weekly virtual town hall session. We've had several of these every Wednesday since the first part of October, so we're really happy to have the Congressman join us. We will do the usual format. We'll have Congressman make a couple of comments, updates, briefing on things that he's working on, things that are going on in Washington that will be of interest to you. And then we'll open it up to questions from our people who are listening in. A couple things. We are recording this session, so it will be it'll be online on our website probably early afternoon, and we'll be pushing it out to members so they can view it later. So for those of you who have questions, as the Congressman makes his remarks, please use the Q&A tab on the bottom of your screen and submit your questions, and then we'll ask those at the end of the session. So with that, again, thank you, Congressman Grothman, for joining us, and I'll boot it over to you.
Okay, well, obviously we had a very active week in Washington last week, or at least a very newsworthy week. There are three spending bills working their way through Congress, and one of the big ones, the infrastructure bill, went through last week. There was an alternative infrastructure bill that, to me, made a lot more sense. Left over from the COVID bills we passed in the past, there are hundreds of billions of dollars that municipalities, towns, states are sitting on. That, quite frankly, in a lot of cases, they don't know what to do with. They had to use it for something COVID related, and the Senate passed, I believe, by a voice vote, a bill allowing those funds to be used for infrastructure. So people think, we need more money for roads. There was an avenue to do that. This bill had a lot of other provisions in it, and furthermore, it got caught up in an agreement between the radical Democrats and the so-called moderate Democrats, a deal that if this bill passed, the moderate Democrats would vote for a much more radical reconciliation bill if there was an adequate CBO estimate, which we may well get, implying that they'll get it within the next couple of weeks, which would be, I think, a disaster for the country. And we have the regular budget, which will probably wind up having another 12 or 13% increase in spending over last year, which is moving through Congress as well. That regular budget should be done by now. It's for the fiscal year beginning October 1st. Normally, Congress delays it and it doesn't get passed until right before Thanksgiving. So you have these three big spending bills all moving forth. Obviously, part of the problem is you're spending way too much money. We see inflation, which we just heard was at, I think, 6.5% over the last year. I personally think that calculation is erroneous. What has only gone up 6.5% in the last year? And of course, that's what you learned in high school. When you print that amount of money, what's going to happen? The cost of everything's going up. The problem is multiplied by the fact that we have problems with the supply chain. We have the boats sitting out there in the Pacific Ocean. We have an inability to deal with the unions out there, which are part of the problem as far as getting trucks going, getting the work done, emptying these ships on those ports. So we have shortages and high prices at the same time, a real disaster for the country. Other things going on. I sometimes think they're doing some other foolish things to divert attention from the border, but I think since I was talking to you guys last time, I have been on the border again down in the Yuma sector. Every time I'm down there, I learn new things I didn't learn before. Some of the things that maybe I haven't discussed with you folks. Down in the Yuma sector, I was reminded there's advertisements being done by the drug gangs right now in both Central America and Brazil, advertising for people to come here. We are being told by the Border Patrol, I've never believed this, but we're being told that these gangs now make more money smuggling people across the border or helping people get across the border than they do with the drugs. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's an indication of the degree to which they are heavily involved in bringing people across the border. Another thing I was not aware of till I found out this time, there's been a lot of discussion about people bringing COVID across the border, people with COVID being released in the United States. We know that's true. In the past, I was aware that people were being tested. When they were tested, they were put in apartments or motels, being held there until they got rid of the COVID. But as a practical matter, people were leaving the motels, and because they weren't guarded, they were going to the United States. This time I learned that they feel they do not have the right to test people. So of course, now we have people who have been tested positive, but we have people who are not being tested at all. I was not aware of that till last time I came down there. The other thing I learned is on the path where you enter the United States through the Yuma sector, there it is littered with photo IDs. In other words, these people are throwing away their identification from Brazil, from Hungary, from Honduras, from wherever, and just leaving them littered on the ground. Well, why would you throw away your photo ID? The only reason I can think of is you have something to hide. You want to start a whole new life in the United States. And not only do you not want people checking into whether you committed crimes in the United States in the past, you don't want people learning whether you committed crimes in South America, in Central America. And I wish I would have brought back pictures of that. I don't know if I took pictures, but it would just be like walking down a street in the United States and you're just under your feet, there are tons and tons of driver's licenses. That's what this path is like going into Yuma. So a huge problem, so many more people coming in the United States than were a year ago, a big problem. As far as other things that we're working on, I continue to try to do something with the excessive student loan debt. I've introduced a couple of bills on the Education Committee. We've talked before, and that I think educational institutions that care about their students wish they could put the kibosh on some of these student loans. I got this idea from, we might as well say, from a private university in the Milwaukee area. And there was a time where if you took out too big of a loan, the educational institution could say, no, you don't have to spend so much money going to college. Those rules changed about 25 years ago. There is no question that people are taking out loans that are unnecessary. That would be one way to rein in this out of control debt. Another thing to do is make sure you're not getting Pell Grants or debt for degrees that are not going to lead to a job. And I'm a big advocate for skills-based education. We know one of the problems we have today that's leading to shortages is there are many jobs in the construction industry, in healthcare and in manufacturing that are not being filled. Skilled jobs in which people, quite frankly, would make a lot more money than a lot of college graduates, but they're not being pushed there. I see no reason for the government to give out loans or and put people in debt when they are pursuing a degree that almost certainly will not lead to a well-paying job. I see no reason to give free Pell Grants or free college, again, for people not winding up with a job that we need in our economy. So those are bills that hopefully we're going to get a hearing on before the Education Committee. One other thing with regard to this student loan and what's going on there. In the big reconciliation package, they are giving free Pell Grants to illegal immigrants. I had a chance to try to pull that provision out twice, both in the Budget Committee and the Education Committee. I am stunned that the Democrats defended that position. Even when I drafted the amendments, I thought maybe some radical Democrats slid that in there, and the more common sense Democrats, if there are any left, the more common sense Democrats would be offended and say, what are we doing? Middle-class American kids are $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in debt going to college. Why are we giving free college to people who enter this country illegally? But the Democrats defended it. They said some of these people are going to be here for many years. We want to have them go to college and become good Americans. What is wrong with giving them free college when your average American middle-class kid is going 30 or 40,000 in debt? I was quite frankly stunned. Between the Education Committee and the Budget Committee, both of which I introduced amendments to take it out on, over 50 Democrats voted to defend that position. And it's something for you to take home as far as how the Democrat Party is changing so radically. and I do talk to Democrats about this. There are some, I guess I'd say, moderate Democrats up, but usually they're afraid of losing a primary to more of the radical wing. And but it's a testament that 50 out of 50 or 52 out of 52 Democrats would vote to leave in this big bill that we're going to talk about passing next week when I go back to Washington, leaving in a provision free college for illegal immigrants. I mean, you just can't make it up. Another provision in there that I think is shocking. They're talking about 80 to 85,000 new IRS agents. That's about how many people, fill up Camp Randall. Unbelievable. The IRS has been kind of squeezed the last few years. Maybe they could make a case for a few more agents, but 85,000 new agents. Think how that's going to change your business. I mean, I've known people who've gone through audits. It's very time consuming. A lot of times you're, accused of things. You have a hard time proving that you did this or didn't do this. I mean, it's sure going to put, it's sure going to slow down American business once 85,000 new agents, and we've got a labor shortage in this country. I mean, there's so many people who need new people to work. Do you really think we need 85,000 new IRS agents when all the factories, when all the trucking firms are looking for new people to work? But that's kind of where we're headed, and I think you could see big problems for the economy ahead. I am introducing a bill making it easier to impose mandatory minimums for fentanyl. When I got this job, which seems like just yesterday, but it was actually almost 7 years ago now, about 45,000 people were dying every year from illegal drug overdoses. That was rightly perceived to be a very high number. All the politicians were supposed to talk about it. It was on the news frequently. In the 7 years since I've got here, after we put billions of dollars fighting drugs in there, after I think I and others made progress in persuading the medical profession not to overprescribe painkillers, we made a lot of progress there. But nevertheless, the number of people who die every year has gone up from 45,000 to 93,000. So more than double in 7 years off what was already a very high amount. And they don't talk about it in the media. I suppose they think people are bored. So they got bored when we were talking about it at 45,000 deaths. Now we have 93,000 deaths. Under current law, in order to be eligible for a mandatory minimum for selling fentanyl, you have to have a lot more fentanyl with you than you would, for example, heroin or meth. Fentanyl is way more dangerous than heroin, which is one of the major reasons why the number of deaths have gone up so much. And that's why I've introduced a bill to try to at least bring the ease of putting people in prison for carrying these drugs, making it easier to go after the people who have fentanyl, which is where so much of the problem is. Of course, people put fentanyl in with heroin, with other drugs, cocaine, and sometimes people die who don't even know that they were getting fentanyl. So a huge problem. I don't think it's even possible to do too much on the criminal justice side of things to rein this in. 93,000 deaths. By comparison, in the whatever it was, the 12-year Vietnam War, there were, I think, 57,000 people who died. And remember how many people died and what a big deal we made about that at the time, which we should have. 57,000 people dying in Vietnam, 93,000 people dying in the last year from illegal drug overdoses in this country. So I introduced a bill there. We're still trying to work on appropriate recognition for the Air America pilots who flew over Laos during the Vietnam War. Had a little bit of a setback there, but we're going to find some way to get recognition. And hopefully that's something we'll have taken care of by the next time I'm talking with you folks. So there's a little bit as far as, the other thing I'm dealing with, if we have anybody here with a medical background, fenofibrate. Had another discussion with two researchers from Israel and a professor from the University of Pennsylvania who feel that fenofibrate, which has traditionally been used as an anti-cholesterol drug, they feel that this drug can really cure COVID. they completed a small study after their initial good news they had 6 or 7 months ago. And in this study, they had 15 people who not only had COVID, but had pneumonia and were on oxygen. So you figure pneumonia on oxygen, you're in pretty bad shape. They gave fenofibrate, which is a generic drug, been used for decades to fight high cholesterol. 14 of the 15 people were out of the hospital in 4 days. The other guy was out of the hospital in, I think it was 2 weeks. So tremendous success. Right now, they want to repeat this study with up to 700 people. They've got over 300 people for a study in the University of Pennsylvania right now. The researchers there are very optimistic. They are using this drug in India, they're using it in China, they're using it in East Timor, and to a certain extent in Israel, all with success. We wish we were getting more help from the CDC. They provided, I believe, a little bit of seed money to the University of Pennsylvania, but quite frankly, given the billions of dollars they have, they should be doing more. Skeptics believe that maybe one of the reasons they're not as gung-ho on this as they should be is it is a generic drug. You know, you can cure COVID for $10 or $15, $20 maybe, if this drug were routinely prescribed when people come into the hospital with COVID. And obviously, a lot of people could make a lot more money if they could develop a new drug to do this. But I think if this drug would become mainstream, if it's as good as our researchers like it to believe would be good, it would solve all sorts of COVID problems, including this desire, which I'm opposed to, mandatory vaccines for businesses required. I mean, obviously, if you could take a pill and get rid of the COVID, which appears you can, it would dial down the urgency on the whole issue. So those are a few of the things that I've been working on. I guess we'll open it up for questions, or if there are any questions you want to give me, John.
Great. We did get a couple questions that came in, and one came in real early regarding something you just talked about with drug abuse, sweeping the nation, and the volume of daily fatalities that we have is just astronomical. So what can Congress do to address that, and what would your preferred solutions be to address that problem?
Up the penalties. I mean, there's the criminal justice side of the thing. Right now, we're doing less at the border. At least when I talk to local law enforcement, they can't understand as all this fentanyl comes into Wisconsin, why it seems to be doing less at the border to stop it coming in. We have to do more education, because I think a lot of people don't realize they're getting fentanyl when they're getting the cocaine. Although I've been told in the past, when people die of heroin overdose, everybody who uses heroin knows people have already died. So if you have friends or acquaintances who've died, you figure that's all the education you need. But apparently not. Last year in Milwaukee County, 540 people overdosed. And then something, Milwaukee County, which is nationwide, not that big of a county, 540 people dying. I mean, and actually, as I understand it, it's being less of a priority than it was a couple of years ago as far as prosecuting people, criminally prosecuting people who supply drugs that result in the fatality under Len Bias laws. It's kind of been dialed back, or so I've been told. But I think stronger mandatory minimums on a national level, stronger education, stronger efforts at the border. We've put a lot of money into treatment. And I do believe there have to be higher standards for treatment, because too many people are just going through treatment and it's not working. Now, part of it is, of course, like all treatments for addictions, you need the person to really want to cure themselves. Not all people want to cure themselves, but obviously the treatment industry is not doing anywhere near as good a job as they should be.
We talked, I think the last couple of times we've had you on, and again today, we talked a lot about the border. You've been to the border a number of times and see you see what's going on, things that the media doesn't show us what's going on. But what can Congress do to help prevent that? I mean, the Democrats certainly have,
it's frustrating. We obviously need more people at the border. I talk about all these big spending bills, be it the reconciliation bill, which we'll talk a little bit more, be it the regular budget, be it the infrastructure bill, whole new programs. paying for preschool for all the 3 and 4-year-olds in the country. Can you imagine how expensive that is? But in all these bills, there's no money for new Border Patrol agents. I mean, how can you do that? And as more people come here, the Border Patrol agents have to spend more and more time on paperwork, so they're not guarding the border. You would figure now more than ever, put agents on the border. Also, when you're down there, you see all the parts from the wall. The wall has been stopped being built, but you see parts of the wall being built. Right now, the steel that was supposed to go into the wall is just sitting everywhere. It's being stolen at night for scrap. Every Border Patrol agent and every member of local law enforcement I've talked to down there feels the wall was a good idea. So to me, more Border Patrol agents, build the wall, one more time, improve your relations with Mexico so that they will begin to take people south of the border again. And I don't know the degree to which they are. Believe it or not, under Donald Trump, to a certain extent because of threats, we had a good relationship with Mexico. When the Border Patrol felt that getting the Mexican Border Patrol or the Mexican military on board, the Mexican military was very helpful this time a year ago. Right now, the attitude of the Mexican military is more, why should we risk our lives standing up to the drug cartels if America itself doesn't seem to care? So I think you've got some repairing to do. The damage that we've done with relationships with Mexico, and also, quite frankly, relationships with Central America, because there was a time in which Central America was holding people, Brazilians, for example, people from Venezuela, being held in Guatemala, being held in Nicaragua, because if they did have to leave their home country, there's no reason why they had to come to the United States. Well, obviously, they abrogated those agreements. Our relationship worse with the Central American countries under President Biden. We've got to rebuild those agreements and relationships as well. And I will point out another problem with the weakness in the border. In addition to we're getting many people here we don't want, many with criminal records. In addition, the problem we have with drugs coming across the southern border. As long as they continue with this open borders policy, it makes America look weak. Just as what happened in Afghanistan makes America look weak. If a country cannot control its own borders, I mean, can you imagine any other country in the world just unnecessarily allowing 100,000 people a month, perhaps, to cross into their border? It just, I am afraid this showing weakness is going to come back to haunt us somewhere else, be it in Taiwan, be it in Ukraine, be it in Korea, somewhere. And for whatever reason, the Biden administration, I don't think, seems to get it.
Staying on the border, I mean, a couple things. I've seen, and you've seen it. I heard over 100,000 illegals coming over the southern border, every month, and it's probably more than that. But when it comes to travel, people coming in from other parts of the country have to show their vaccine documentation. Why aren't we, at the very least, as people come over, claiming, refugee or status or whatever, vaccinate these folks?
Well, I guess the number one priority for the Biden administration is to get as many people here as possible. Like I said, my 5th time down there this year, I still learn new things. I learned last time the Border Patrol told me, hey, in addition to what you're hearing we're doing and not doing, we feel we cannot ask people not only to be vaccinated, we can't ask people to be tested. So I think it just shows the priority of the Biden administration. We're not going to do anything to stand in the way of getting as many people across the southern border as possible, which is something that I think was kind of advertised during the campaign when I think both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris said that they were for free medical care for all illegals. Talk about advertising for illegals to get here. So it shouldn't have been a surprise, but this is what we're getting. We're getting an administration whose number one priority appears, let as many people here as possible. They've also made it more difficult to kick people out of the country. They've raised the bar for the type of crimes you have to commit to be removed from the country. So another, advertisement, why not come here? As is, as I mentioned, the free education. I mean, why would somebody not come here if the United States is offering a free education? Talk about an advertisement that we're not serious about enforcing our border, but that's what we've got.
You signed me up for that, it's, we're providing benefits for folks that, aren't citizens of this country. We treat them almost better than the citizens of the United States.
Yeah, they are being treated better because citizens of the United States, when it comes to healthcare, usually have big deductibles and they have to weigh, should I go to the doctor or should I not go to the doctor? The people coming here across the southern border don't have to worry about a big deductible. So they do have it better than citizens of the United States.
The Biden administration announced, and he retracted, and I think he came back again, this whole notion of uh, payments to families that were separated under the Trump administration. I mean, I've heard up to $450,000 per family on settlements. What's
I'm reluctant to talk about this stuff because I'm going to lose my credibility because nobody would possibly think that things could be this bad. Yes, Joe Biden went back and forth on the $450,000. I don't know whether it's still on the table. By the way, in July, in 1 month, 15,000 unaccompanied minors were allowed in the country. And the reason for this is because we have an open borders policy. Before we had an open borders policy, it would be very difficult for minors to come in the country. Right now, what happens is the kids show up, they write the addresses they want to show up on their shirts, on their underwear, whatever, and the Border Patrol will turn the children over to a social services agency, maybe Catholic Social Services, and they will find a way to deliver the 7 or 8-year-old child to his parents or aunt and uncle or wherever, in wherever they want to go. It's hard to believe. It drives the Border Patrol up the wall because they know that if they tried to put their child or an American tried to drop off their child at Mitchell Airport and say, told the clerk there, deliver this child to such and such address in Miami, social services would be after those parents. But if you want to talk about breaking up families, having 15,000 unaccompanied minors in 1 month, the Border Patrol obligated to deliver them wherever they want to go, that's breaking up families. And this 450,000, I don't know whether it's going to be implemented or not, but you can see from Joe Biden's public statements where the heart of the Biden administration is. They would have no problem giving individuals $450,000 because they were separated from their family on the southern border and separated, quite frankly, for sometimes very good reasons. It's just, it's a way of thinking I do not understand. And it also shows how quickly they are to throw away money on everything. Money is no object to this administration. And giving $450,000 to people who want to come here illegally, I mean, really? But the last statement I saw from Joe Biden, it's something that he feels should be on the table. So that's what we have for president. I mean, I get along well with my Democrat friends. I'm working with them on a variety of bills, but that party is so different from what that party was even 10 years ago.
We've all seen the pictures of the harbor in, I think, LA area with cargo freight, just sitting on ships waiting to be, unloaded and shipped throughout the United States. But there's a lot of, there's higher standards in California as it relates to semi-freight trucks and that sort of thing. So a lot of the semis can't even travel pick up in that state. Is there anything we can do federally to?
Yeah, I don't know whether I'd call it higher standards. I'd call it more union friendly standards. And they got rid of the owner operator model, which so many truckers, including in Wisconsin, use. So you have a shortage of truckers. You have a situation in which they're not allowing more automation on the docks. And that's a union related thing as well. Obviously, California, very, very, union friendly. And, I'm not anti-union, but obviously both the things done to, I guess, assist the trucking unions and the longshoremen's unions are one of the reasons why things are more difficult. Now, I have heard more ships are going through the Panama Canal. Hopefully, we're going to be emptying more of the ships in the Gulf of Mexico ports or on the east coast of the United States. I think Congress could step in and pass legislation. But I think Joe Biden's got the same problem as they do in California. Joe Biden, on some union issues, will be an extremist. You don't have to get rid of the unions, but he's being, he's not going to do the things that it would take to empty these ships quicker. And that's one of the reasons why we have a shortage. You talk to all the manufacturers that I tour them frequently. And again, you find final product cannot go out the door because certain components are sitting in the ships in the Pacific Ocean. And, we have a transportation secretary who just drives me up a wall. Taking time off at a time when he's got a crisis to take care of his new adopted child. Well, does that make any sense? I mean, I guess he doesn't think it's that important a job. I guess kind of like Kamala Harris thinking looking at the border isn't that important. I have other things to do. I'm not going to devote time to it. And apparently, Pete Buttigieg, it's nice to spend time bonding with his new child, and transportation will take us. The supply chain in America is something not a priority until he uses up his family medical leave. Apparently, to this administration, again, that's not a priority. We heard, statements to the degree that maybe America's got to get used to this, and you do see more and more empty shelves. Things that you expect to see both at the food store, the big box store, not there. And I think in other presidents they would consider this a concern. It kind of reminds me almost like a socialist country where you've got money to spend, but there's nothing in the shelves. We're not there yet, but obviously, it's just you wouldn't believe this is happening to America, and it doesn't seem as though the administration considers this a crisis either.
It's more of we just need to lower your expectations, and things are going to be different if we keep doing those sorts of things.
Headlines that I've never seen before in my life. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
I've never seen before. Yep.
Yeah. End of August, or the entire month of August, the Afghanistan withdrawal, occurred, and you heard a lot about it at that time. It's been pretty quiet. What's the latest on? I mean, how many U.S. citizens are still, were there?
I don't know how many want to come here. That's a hard number to get because, of course, there's always, American citizens over there want to stay there. Maybe they got Afghan families, whatever. I do not have a hard number on the number that are trying to get out. I recently had good news. I talked to someone from my district from Sheboygan County. We helped a translator get out, and they're, I think he's going to wind up settling in the 6th congressional district. But right now, the family of the military folks who got him over here, they're taking him to see the sites in Chicago. So we have good news there. But the exact number of people who want to get out but are not being let out, I do not have a number.
When Joe Biden ran and won the presidency, he ran on two things: trying to be a uniter, bringing the country back together. It doesn't really feel like that's happening. The other thing is he said he would manage the COVID situation, better than the former administration. And I think I saw a number that there were more deaths in the first 9 months of COVID, of his presidency, first 9 months of his presidency, than the entire last year of the Trump administration.
Well, I'll deal with both the issues. First of all, I think he's incredibly divisive. I think in all these bills as they move forth, there's more emphasis on racial division, more programs that are designed for some Americans and not other Americans. I think they are doing, and just the verbiage from the Democrat Party, be it on committee, be on the floor, is more and more racism. We have horrible problems in America. I spent Saturday at a New Year's celebration among New Year and Oshkosh here, and it's just amazing how well people are doing and how happy they are to be here in America. People coming here from a very different culture than in America succeeding. I spent some time last week talking with someone from India, and they talked about how wonderful America it is and how they cannot understand how anybody would feel racism was holding anybody back here. Again, another person with a different background, have been wearing a turban, and just wildly successful. But the Biden administration is doing all they can to try to persuade people we have a huge racial problem that is holding someone back. And I think it's a political move. I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to tell new immigrants that they are being put upon and they should be bitter and angry. Hopefully he doesn't get away with it. I sometimes wonder if that's why he wants to give them free college, so that their first exposure in America is to that segment of America that is maybe the most anti-American segment of America, which is to say the American professors of liberal arts. But for whatever reason, obviously he has decided to be as divisive as he can be in trying to create racial divisions in the United States. And thank God the vast majority of immigrants, I think of people I know, Tunisia, Pakistan, India, Philippines, Nigeria, Costa Rica, people I know are just all hitting the ground running when they get to the United States and succeeding, despite Joe Biden and others trying to tell them that America is a horrible racist country that you cannot succeed in. As far as the COVID situation is concerned, I mentioned that I have researchers who I think this should be a done deal, but by now the research should be completed. I have drugs that I believe would largely cure COVID. Ivermectin is another one they should be looking at more than they already have. I'll come back and emphasize vitamin D one more time. I talked about that a lot a year ago, but if it were a little more publicized, I think it would dramatically cut the number of people who have COVID. And by the way, right now, more and more, I am finding people who have been vaccinated who are getting the COVID. I talked to one of the coroners in my district who told me lately in his county he had not seen a lot of people dying, but those people who are dying had already been vaccinated. So just because you vaccinated, no reason to get overconfident and no reason to stop taking vitamin D. I really wish the CDC would emphasize that more. And anybody can ask their doctors. It doesn't cost that much to get a vitamin D test to see whether you have enough vitamin D or not. Something else that should be being pushed by the Biden administration, but is not.
Earlier on, you talked about spending bills making their way through Congress last weekend, the late Friday, and then I think the president signed it on Saturday, the infrastructure bill. 1.2 trillion, I believe. And I understand there's only 10% of that. It's really going to what you and I would think is really infrastructure.
It's more than that, but it's far less than necessary. And it was used as a bill to, again, there's politically correct stuff in there. I'm politically correct, racially divisive stuff in there. But in addition to that, a lot of things related to kind of the green revolution or whatever you want to call it. And I think it's important for the young people of the country to understand how much cleaner we are in America today, both air and water, than they were 50 years ago when I grew up. And also the degree to which other countries, to a degree, our competitors are ignoring the crisis that they say we have around the globe. I believe, I think it might be 50, but I think it's 150 coal-fired plants being built right now in China who did not show up at this Scotland conference. But nevertheless, it's apparent from the infrastructure bill that to a certain extent, at great expense, the United States is going to get more and more involved in technologies which maybe are not the most efficient. I should also point out, by the way, as we speak, Europe has gone all in here as well. As you make energy more expensive, people just move their industry somewhere else. And I am told foundries, for example, are opening up as quickly as possible in India, where again, they don't have standards anywhere near as strict as in the United States. Now, a lot of those jobs, they're losing European jobs and sending them to India, but nevertheless, there are plenty of countries out there that are a lot less clean than the United States. And when you have stringent standards, what happens is not less pollution. You just transfer the production from the United States and Europe to India or China, and you're going to wind up with more pollution because the standards there are either low or, insofar as they do have standards, they're ignored. And like I said, I mean, just look at the number of coal plants going up in China, or I am told the number of foundries going up in India.
Well, the next spending bill on the docket is the reconciliation bill. I understand that's coming up next week. Does Nancy Pelosi have the votes to bring that over the finish line?
I was hoping the politics after the Virginia gubernatorial election would cause this to come to a screeching halt. And to my disappointment, they reached a deal with their so-called moderate Democrats that if they got a CBO score to their liking, they would move this radical bill out of the House. I would just be scared to death to think they have enough votes for that, but they might have enough votes for it, which means it's going to go to the Senate, and we're just going to be relying on Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin to put the brakes on over there. And very scary. I think I mentioned we have the government taking care of all the 3 and 4-year-olds under the bill, which is kind of a big shift towards government, in addition to the expense, government role in raising the children. You know, traditionally in America, the families are responsible for raising the children. They have this major provision. I mentioned the over 80,000 new IRS agents. They have a new climate corps. Again, at a time where we have a shortage of people working anywhere in this country, the government's going to hire, you know, tens of thousands of new people. It's across the board a big increase in the role of government in life, as well as more provisions aimed at this people with this background or that background, making that more of a permanent part of American life. If you apply for a job, what is your racial background? Oh, we have a special program for you there, a special program for you here. Not the type of America I think our ancestors wanted. I think it's unconstitutional. I hope somebody brings this stuff to the Supreme Court and we begin to bat it back. But we are headed towards such a more race-conscious America, and at a time when it's just so unnecessary. When you see so many immigrants coming here legally, succeeding. I mean, I invite people to show up sometime at one of the ceremonies in Milwaukee or Madison, where, you know, every month I think in Milwaukee they swear in another 140. I think. No, I think swearing in, I think 500 people a month in Milwaukee, and I attended them. People from all around the world, you know, now we're supposed to say people of color, people from Asia, people from Africa, people from Latin America. You talk to them, they're also glad to be here. They've been here for 5 or 6 years already. They're successful in America. It's kind of hard to believe that you attend one of these ceremonies in Milwaukee and you see all these happy people from different backgrounds. And then I fly out to Washington and I hear what a horrible racist country it is and nobody can succeed. I mean, you know, I don't know where the Biden administration is coming from, but obviously these programs and these bills are designed to pound into people's heads that we have a huge racial problem and they should view themselves not as Americans, but they should view themselves as Pakistani Americans or view themselves as Filipino Americans or whatever. And you know, the reason we, in our Constitution, we treat people equally is so we wouldn't wind up like this. where America was treating everybody differently. But I think the Constitution is being ignored here, and we're going to find out why our forefathers put those provisions in there.
Well, going into next year is an election year. And, there was a election last week in Virginia. Kind of created at least a template for, for the GOP moving forward here. How do you see that playing out in the
Well,
upcoming midterm?
I don't think, I think the Republicans should lay out their vision, but I think the Democrat vision is one that, let's hope, is very unpopular. I mean, whether you look at what happened in Afghanistan, whether what's going on the border, whether you look at the spiraling out of control inflation, whether you look at the huge debt, whether you look at the racial division that they're sowing, I would believe we're going to get a Republican wave. And it's not like I'm Mr. Gung-ho thinking the Republicans are doing everything right in Washington, because they're not. But I would hope America would rebel against all of these provisions. And Joe Biden's not going to be on the ballot, but we're going to have people who are big Joe Biden cheerleaders on the ballot. We've got to pick up, I believe it is 5 seats to get the majority in the House. I think we're going to do that. I hope we do good things with it. Obviously, we're 50-50 in the Senate, which means Kamala Harris is the tiebreaker. We don't have our best seats up for Republicans, but I cannot imagine, if you're a Democrat or voted Democrat last time, you'd be a little bit embarrassed. And right now, last week, next week, it seems the Democrats are hitting the gas. Their attitude is, we're not going to have a chance to change America this much again for maybe another 10 or 12 years. So let's go all in. And I hope America comes out to vote and says, no, we don't like this stuff. And I hope if the Republicans do get the majority, they have the guts to undo some of it. Because, of course, with new spending programs, people get used to those programs. And sometimes in the past, the Republicans, if they do take control, are afraid to roll things back. And for the good of the country, not only economically, because we cannot go so much further in debt, but just socially, we have got to back away from this. Everything revolves around the government attitude that permeates not only the reconciliation bill if it passes, but is even permeating our regular budget.
Okay, with that, we are nearing the end of our time here. So, Congressman, again, thank you for joining us. Over it's been 7 years you've been in office already. You've been a great supporter. You've helped us in a lot of different ways, you and your staff. We appreciate your work that you're doing in Washington and in the district here. And I've said it before, you're probably the hardest working congressman in the United States. I mean, there's not a time, a weekend where, I'm out and about and I see you out, someplace, working, meeting with your constituents, and that's just great to see. So we really, really appreciate that.
I do try to get out, and we saw a couple of nice things in Oshkosh over the weekend. Like I said, we had one of the Hmong New Year's there, and it was very enjoyable meeting with those folks.
Okay, well, again, thank you very much. To remind everybody, we did record this, so it'll be up on our website by the end of the afternoon, probably early afternoon. We're taking next week off from our weekly sessions, but on the 24th, the day before Thanksgiving, we have State Senator Dan Fine joining us, so be looking for that. And once again, Congressman Grothman, thank you for your help, for your service, and for being with us and being our guest. So with that, we're signing off. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.